Well, we've just had a lovely iteration of the consciousness deep dive. At least I'm going to call it lovely from my own perspective, although I think we went deep and there were some challenging things that were said. So I'm what is it? It's June 4th, and what a great little group of people. So what are we harvesting? What are you taking away from this? What do you want to tell other people who weren't in our conversation that might help inform the conversations they might have or the collective meaning making we might be doing in a few weeks?
So this is Heather Tischbein. And I want to thank Ben for convening this conversation. And I want to thank the universe for making the opening for me 15 minutes ahead of time. And I want to acknowledge the power of, for me, of the question, what are generative ways to engage in mainstream context? Because this last 90 minutes has helped me to get some clarity around my my galumphing, I think it was called, my galumphing efforts in public meetings to try to show up in a way that demonstrates generative engagement in mainstream context, and to actually appreciate and own the experimental nature of that for myself. And I feel very supported and stronger now as a result of this conversation. So thank you to everybody. I needed this help today, and the universe provided. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
This is Ken Homer in Centerville, California. Heather, I want to thank you for adding something to a phrase I've heard for a long time about speaking truth to power. I'd never heard the part about speaking truth to power with kindness and respect. It may appear that it is failing in certain contexts these days, but for me, I think it reinforces something inner for me about the importance of maintaining kindness and respect, even in the face of people who don't necessarily accept or yield to kindness and respect. And also the point about being attached to outcomes. I'm very attached to an outcome that I don't have a definite shape to, but I know the outlines are a planet where it's safe and healthy for our children to grow up on. And I'm very disturbed by what's going on the planet right now that seems to be working against that. And I find that when I'm in conversation with people like the folks on this call, it reminds me of just how many of us are also attached to that outcome and working towards that outcome. And that also gives me strength and helps to resource me in the midst of this blizzard of lies that seem to be exposed to these days. So I'm going to keep speaking truth to power with kindness and respect, whether it's received or not. Thank you.
So this is Carol Gorlick, and I'm in Connecticut. I'm new to this group, but thanks is not enough because I feel like I've entered a world of kindred spirits right in the middle of a very intense and important conversation. And the reason why I took the talking stick was, for me, the kindness and respect issue is very significant and something I'm going to walk away and think a lot more about. The vision of kindness and respect that goes with being nice is troubling. And I think for me, the challenge is to overcome the idea that any kind of confrontation or disagreement means it's not kind or respectful, and I'm not being nice. And truth to power, by definition, means one has to deal with things that are potentially not all in agreement. The two other things that came out, which I think are useful to anybody who's in this conversation, is the value of Marianne Williamson, who is a role model in talking about what her values are, and she has nothing to lose. And Heather, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I was enormously touched by your question, what am I willing to die for? And how deep that is, and it's not necessarily physically. And I think that's extremely relevant to this conversation going on about what can we do and what do we want and have to do. I'm done.
So my name is Rosa Suizarreta. Can you hear me? Yes, okay, great. My name is Rosa Suizarreta, and what I'm taking away from this conversation is the power of being honest about our feelings. The power of being honest about our feelings and exploring our anger. And I just no answers, but just real curiosity about making distinctions between, say, for instance, anger and moral outrage. Also, distinctions between being attached to outcome and having real clarity about our intentions. And we didn't speak about this in this call, but I'm wondering, another really powerful emotion in addition to anger is grief. And I think that sometimes we can be trying to make others see just because that it's our grief for the very real possibility of what we can lose that can sometimes make us, try and push things. And so I think attending to our grief, attending to our anger, and freeing our conditioning about our fear of confrontation and disagreement, and so that we can engage in constructive ways. Yeah, it's all a learning process. Thank you all.
Thank you, Rosa. Ben Roberts here in Newtown, Connecticut. And we touched on grief just a little bit because we were talking a lot about Meg Wheatley's later writings, So Far From Home, and then the book after that. And she talks a lot about grief, and it was a theme when we were presenting those ideas, Heather and I, in 2013 after the Sandy Hook shootings. There's a wonderful film, if people haven't seen it, called Albatross, made by a student of Joanna Macy's. If you go to Albatross, the film, it's on our resource list too. You can find it and stream it. All about grief and love and beauty and the challenge of the current state of the world. And the theme is how plastic pollution is affecting the albatross colonies on Midway Island, way out in the middle of the Pacific, 3,000 miles from any continent. Highly recommend it. What I want to add, in addition to the non-attachment to outcomes that was named as part of the stance that could be effective, I was really struck by the idea you were describing, Marianne Williamson, Rosa, as not competing or persuading. It's so interesting to me, and because I know that's so, and I think of my own sort of dysfunctional version of when I get angry and I do my typical kind of white male thing. I mean, I was a high school debater. I was the captain of our debate team. I'm just so trained to do this shit, and then I do it in other ways. It doesn't work, right? And it connects with the same thing you were talking about being right versus being effective. and how that can show up on the left too, in this kind of, you know, moral superiority that doesn't serve our ends, our goals. So how to take that strong stand and speak our truth, not just with kindness and compassion, yes, and respect, and also not actually trying to persuade anyone, because I think the theory of change is that actually if you're speaking the truth, you don't need, people know it's the truth. And as soon as I come from that place of trying to tell you you're wrong and I have to convince you why you're stupid, well, you know, game over. Because most people aren't stupid and most people are kind and compassionate. And it's only when we're terrified or when things are breaking down, you know, that which creates that fear. I think that so many people of goodwill and good heart and mind end up believing dangerous things. And I assume part of the journey is that, you know, well, I'm finding that in myself in this call. It's really clear where that shows up for me. Thank you all. Any other parting words for our fellow?
Thank you, everybody. I have to go. It's been really wonderful to see you all and to reconnect. And I hope that we can keep this going and that I'll see you in this space or another soon.
Thanks, Ken. Any more before I turn the recording off?
Thank you, Ben.